as long as people are trying to fight these tyrants on a physical level, as long as they're trying to bring these people down, and as Paul Levy said, if we were to eradicate the world of all the Bushes, the Blairs, the royal family, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, it would do nothing, because we have a schism within us, and all we're going to do is we're going to start from scratch again and build the same exact system over and over again because of our collective incapacity for freedom. That's what we're going to do, because it's at a psychic level. It's at a spiritual level. And unless we affect change on a psychic level, nothing is ever going to get any better on a physical level, because these are just symptoms. Think of what you were to do if you had a fever, or say you had an infection, and the symptoms of that infection was a fever and a headache and cramping and whatever. If you were to only fight the symptoms of it, the physical manifested symptoms of that infection, such as the fever and the headache, what's going to happen? The fever is going to grow stronger and stronger and stronger, and it's going to come back in other forms. It's going to start popping its head up in other ways until you choose to look at it and say, look, you're not fighting the right battle. You're not looking at what the root cause is. Because if you don't fight that infection, if you don't fight the root cause, our psychological illness, nothing's going to happen in the physical plane. And the biggest problem is people refuse to see that.
Absolutely. It's a very, very good analogy there, actually, of the fever and just fighting the root cause of all of this. Because, again, we are taken on such emotional roller coasters, as I said before, that food scarcity, what have you, it's the financial crash, whatever it is, and I mean, just look at for instance, the idea of how they did it with the market. It's like one day it's plunging, right, and the other day it's up several points again, and then the next day it's plunging to infinity again. So we're taking on these emotional roller coasters all the time, and there's always going to be something new to worry about, or to be absorbed about, or to be angry about, what have you. It's like the world and the media, particularly the mainstream media, is constantly trying to make us, or engage us in these various problems all the time. And as long as we play along with that, I personally don't feel that it's anything bad, like observing it and looking at it for what it is, and analyzing it, in a kind of a calm, rational way. That's very important, I feel. But again, if you're drawn into it too much and you're taking on that roller coaster, and again, ties into that the idea of the apocalypse, that we also have many people out there that are kind of, they're longing for change so bad that they actually want to, bring about the destruction of the system, meaning that they're very kind of apocalyptic in their mindset. And I definitely understand that, that idea of okay, let's hit rock bottom here once and for all, and get rid of it, and that might be one solution. But as you say, Ben, if we don't start building up that structure again with a proper backdrop or mindset to it, we're gonna create the same thing over and over and over again, and nothing would have been solved,
Very true, absolutely. And I mean, it's definitely this physical world. It reflects, it has a reciprocal relationship with our psyche. I mean, it's there's some people who say that this physical world is an illusion. It's nothing. Especially in some of the Eastern philosophies, talk about how matter is really just the lowest on the food chain, the lowest part of the hierarchy, and saying how just the physical world is an illusion. Well, that's not quite true, because the bus will still run you over and kill you. If you put your hand in a boiling pot of water, it's, you're going to realize how, real this physical world truly is. So it's definitely, it's a battle that goes both ways. But it's absolutely most important to understand where consciousness plays into this, because, being the root, even the author Neville gets into the fact that everything that we are is just an awareness. The way all of this came together is just an awareness, our conscious awareness of what we are, and that's what gave us form. So our consciousness is really the root of what we are right now. And even Rudolf Steiner in Anthroposophy, there's actually an article written about that, the advent of Ahriman. And Ahriman and Lucifer in Anthroposophy represent two different forces that work upon us at a deep psychological level. And the interesting thing about that is the fact that he says that, and this is actually Robert S. Mason speaking in his article, The Advent of Ahriman. The fact is that scientific thinking, normal in this epoch, no matter how clever, is hardly conscious at all. In the kind of consciousness usual in our scientific culture, we become conscious only of the fixed results of thinking. After it has been accomplished, we are not usually conscious of the thinking process itself. And that's what he gets into, is the fact that just thinking, the way that the average person today thinks is not really conscious at all. Thinking does not imply consciousness, because there's always, where does thinking come from? It's not a physiological effect. So where do thoughts and where does consciousness actually start? And then when you're looking at philosophy, there being the object in motion, what is the first mover? You always have to trace it back farther. What actually put those thoughts into motion? What is behind your actual consciousness? And what he gets into is the fact that Ahriman, who is manifesting in the later part of the 1900s, Ahriman being a force that is more rigid and earthly, and is more getting into like straight scientific strain of thought, and Lucifer being the opposite of that, having more levity and having more of how do I want to say it, more of a spiritual side of it, but there being no balance between Ahriman and Lucifer. So he basically says that is exactly what we're seeing today, is the advent of Ahriman. It's the manifestation within consciousness, an archetypal manifestation of Ahriman within our consciousness that pushes our thinking. So Ahriman is actually pre-thought, and it's actually what this is just obviously the idea of anthroposophy, but basically what he's saying is that that's the perfect way to put it, is the fact that thinking in the way that we think of it today is not usually what true consciousness is. We are not usually conscious of the thinking process itself, just the result of our thinking.
Right.
So that's really where you get into when you really want to like trace back the core of this battle that we're fighting at a psychological or spiritual level. It's not just the conscious thoughts that you're thinking any day, and even Carl Jung got into this, Freud got into this, that there's a shadow, there's something behind our conscious called the unconscious, that's our shadow, is where all of our repressed emotions, things that we don't want to realize about ourselves, things that we don't want to admit about ourselves, we push into the shadow area. And there was a book by Ken Wilber called No Boundaries, and he says that we psychologically set up boundaries of the self and the not self. And everything we don't want to see about ourselves and don't want to admit about ourselves, we push into the non-self category. And usually that's when it pops up as a projected manifestation. The people in our lives are a manifested projection of what's going on within us.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a fascinating area, this whole thing, and again of the idea of when you emotionally respond to something like that, it's something within someone else you don't like or whatever. All that is in one way is actually a hint, that this is something that triggers within yourself. This is something that speaks to your shadow, and you're being faced with something within yourself that you probably are very uncomfortable with or have difficulty facing, whatever it might be. So there's all on a kind of a holographic or fractal level. There's all kinds of learning that can take place once you're aware of the system that is in place, or even the laws, if you will, of the psyche that are in place. Meaning that you can learn and grow from every single experience as long as you're aware of what the universe or the world is trying to teach you, or even your higher self, if you want to look at it that way. And that might also actually a little bit take us into the idea of the importance then of taking back our mind, taking back our, as you said, Ben, taking back our kind of our thinking process, and also at the same time, the idea of what we pay attention to is something that becomes, or even actually forms reality. I'm thinking of the quantum mechanics of the new scientific field in regards to if the control freaks out there are constantly trying to be or create the reality that they want to create, they would do it through the help of our consciousness, of our creativity, of our force, of our mind, if you will. But if we focus away from that, or see it at least a little bit differently, then we can begin to form reality in a totally new, a new way, basically. And it's a difficult area. It's a lot of woo-woo, behind it all, and it's very difficult to sort it out, Just because Oprah is up there now talking about it doesn't make it, more or less true, of course. But
exactly.
It can be used, positively or negatively, as all things do. And the danger here, of course, is that people too much, don't engage the world at all. They're totally disconnecting it because it's just it's no reason to pay attention to it. It's just ugly. It's just bad. But the world, again, as you said before, Ben, the world is a projection of ourselves, of our shadow, then of our psyche, and that means that if we don't look at it, if we just avoid it because it's bad and horrific, then we're still not going to solve the problem. So we need to focus and pay attention to it at the same time as we change our attitude towards it and start to learn from it instead of being drawn down by it or emotionally engaged by it.
Right, absolutely. I mean, I think, the best piece of advice that I've ever received is to never look at things in one way for too long. I mean, it's a simple way of putting it, but it's just the idea of consistently refreshing and renewing your mind, And it's because we can look at the world, like I was saying earlier, we can look at the world as a dangerous place. If we choose, we could also look at that very same world through the same eyes, but we could look at it in a different way, and we could look at it in a way that, well, this is a lesson to be learned, because there's always a lesson to be learned about anything. But I truly think that for a lot of even in some of the holidays that we see, and a lot of the traditions that now that we just take for granted, that come all the way from the ancient worlds and ancient cultures. A lot of these traditions were to try and push us to renew and reincarnate our mind in some way, shape, or form. Like, just look at Christmas. Mm-hmm. The Christmas holiday. When most people look at it nowadays, I mean, for one, this winter ritual that we call Christmas is actually far predating Christianity. So when we look at just the holiday of Christmas, it happens at the lowest point of the sun, in the northern hemisphere. Like the sun reaches its lowest point for a few days and then rises again 3 days later, and that's where we get the consistent idea of Mithras, Dionysus, Attis, Christ, Horus that died, and then 3 days later was reborn. Basically, and the idea behind I don't even like calling it Christmas anymore. It's really just the winter ritual. Right. The idea behind dying and then being reborn is at that point, winter is really just a reflection of it's just a larger reflection of what our nighttime is. It's during the day that, when the sun is at its highest point, that is the masculine daytime, and that's also reflective of our summer. But the nighttime is a feminine quality, and that's more reflective of our winter. So when you look into what the feminine and the masculine actually are what their qualities more get into is the feminine is more about inner focus and focusing inwardly and taking all of the sense perceptibility in all of our sense worlds, everything that we've experienced through our physical body, and integrating it later on at night or in the winter, integrating that in more of like the feminine quality with inner focus. And the reason behind that is the fact that when you look at winter time, it's the same thing as our nighttime. It's a time of reflecting upon the past year of all of our experiences. So then what we're supposed to do is integrate that into a deeper part of our soul. Everything that we've experienced, we integrate that into our philosophies and deep within us as wisdom, as our experience. And then we allow all our preconceived notions and everything, like all of our concepts and preconceived notions that we have about the